Welcome back. We're live from the National Results Operations Centre right here in Pretoria, really the nerve centre of elections 2021 and most of the elections over the past two decades or so. We have with us here in studio the Chief Electoral Officer of the Electoral Commission of South Africa, Mr. Mamabolo. Thank you very much indeed, sir, for your time.
Thank you.
I want to get, first of all, to what many regard as the burning issue of the day, on the lips of many, the evacuation of the IEC yesterday. What happened?
Well, we had an emergency situation, a circuit breaker bent on the distribution box, and our partners, the city of Tshwane, acted swiftly to control of the situation and with the police and so on, to secure the center. By 10:30 last night, it was restored.
Communication is key. It talks to your mission as a commission of transparency. It talks to ethical conduct. We put up a breaking news story last night at around 6:40. I saw the official communication on Twitter from the IEC at about 9:10. Why did it take that long to communicate to the public what was going on in this important place, the ROC?
No. We agree with you that one has to communicate and communicate expeditiously. Now, I don't think to the extent that we may have delayed, one must impute a lack of integrity. Not necessarily. We were dealing with an emergency. We needed to ensure that we knew what the problem was before we communicate. Because remember, you also don't want to communicate facts you are not sure about. You've got to establish your facts. Once those are established, then confidently speak to people. So that was the delay. We had to understand what had happened.
The understanding is that our journalists were trying to get a hold of the IEC last night to get an update. I understand where you're coming from in terms of getting your ducks in order to communicate better. But don't you think that the lack of communication over those hours contributes to a lack of transparency and thereby erodes the integrity in the public eye?
No. We've always dealt with all matters related to electoral processes transparently, nothing to hide. The very existence of this center is about transparency. The very being, the very concept, it's about transparency. That's why we all here. That's why parties are here. That's why all media is here, precisely to give people an opportunity for unfettered access to all role players. So I don't think there was anything untoward. We had an emergency situation. We needed to establish what the problem was, and once we did so, then to communicate with the country.
Having said that, from the lessons that have been learned from last night, do you think that you need to improve in terms of your communication to the public?
Well, communication can always improve because communication is an evolving thing, and people perceive it differently. So there is no universal monolithic way of communicating. Yeah. There can always be a need to improve the manner in which any institution, any person communicates.
What is the Electoral Commission's understanding of how people perceive communication differently in terms of the timing of when an incident happens to the time that people know the exact details of it?
Well, the universal point is that around communication is that communicate as soon as you can, but communicate on established facts. There can be nothing as dangerous as communicating something which is not predicated on established facts. You've got to establish the facts. Once you've done so, then speak confidently and authoritatively.
So you're saying that 2 hours or so that there was no communication, you were still trying to establish what was going on at that time. Is that the reason for the lag in communication from last night?
Certainly, we needed to know what was the problem. We knew that it was an electricity supply problem, but precisely what was the problem? Was it sabotage? Was it a mere engineering glitch? you needed to know precisely what you're dealing with. And all our agencies that we are working with here were involved trying to establish that fact so that we could communicate.
Was there a fire?
No, there was a burning of a circuit breaker on the distribution board.
So there was a flame. When you mean burning, there was a flame.
No flames, but the burning of, in other words, oversupply of heat resulting with malfunctioning because of burn.
Talk to us about that unit that was destroyed, the extent of the destruction due to the word that you used, burning.
Come again, sir?
The unit that was destroyed by this electrical fault, was it completely destroyed? I'm just trying to understand the extent of what was happening last night.
It was completely destroyed, necessitating a replacement.
So you're saying there were no open wild flames?
No.
There was something that led to this unit going down?
Yeah.
Why then evacuate the whole building?
You evacuate the building because there isn't sufficient electrical supply into the building. So for safety purposes, you take everybody out whilst you investigate and establishing the facts. There can be nothing worse than having identified the problem, leaving people here and subject people to risk. I don't think that would have been a prudent way of dealing with the situation, to leave people in here and expose them to risk.
At the time when you learnt about the situation, did you believe at the time that there was a real and present danger to those working inside here?
At the time when this came to light, we did not know what the extent of the problem is, hence the need to establish facts. And once the facts were established, as soon as possible thereafter, get the replacement unit in and restore operations.
I understand in part that special votes are used to kind of test the IEC's logistics, infrastructure, etc., etc. The big day is tomorrow. What's the chances of this happening again?
Well, I don't know. What I can tell you is that preventative maintenance has happened. And on that basis, one is comfortable that everything was done to ensure that we don't face an interruption of that nature. But a reasonable person in this position must ensure that there is preventative maintenance of the infrastructure, which has happened, and that should take us through the whole process.
And you have, obviously, a number of plans. We have to run down the alphabet, isn't it? Because you've got a big mission here, operation here. So I'm assuming that Plan B, it doesn't stop there. There are other contingency plans.
Of course. I mean, we have the City of Tshwane Electric Department here full-time. We have our own electrical contractors here. We have ESCOM here. We have generators that are set in and so on. So all reasonable measures that have to be put in place are in fact in place.
All right, let's talk about what's happening over the past 2 days. Special votes underway. We're getting a lot of positive reports. Some challenges. Talk to us about what you're getting.
Overall, a very good performance across the country. Better today than was the case yesterday. But that's par for the game. You always have that situation. Special votes offers you an opportunity to ready yourself for the big day tomorrow. So we're quite happy, and we are comfortable that by 5 o'clock this afternoon, we would have reached at least a substantial majority of those who have applied for special votes.
We've seen some tensions in certain parts of the country. In particular, yesterday we saw what happened in Umzinto in KwaZulu-Natal. Talk to us about the IEC's role when their voting stations are affected in this regard, in terms of controlling conflict, in terms of controlling tension before and on voting day.
Well, we do have conflict management panels deployed across all provinces who would intervene in situations such as those. But some of them have gone beyond the level of conflict mediation, such as the one we had in Umzinto. And that require a security intervention. And as we've seen, security intervened. They were on hand to try to restore operations, but difficult, I must say.
What are some of the challenges other than that in terms of conflict that comes with getting to this point of readiness for the Electoral Commission?
Well, we are organizing an election in the midst of a pandemic. We are organizing an election in 42 days when, in fact, ordinarily, you have to organize an election in about 80 days. So circumstances are very different, and circumstances, I would venture to say, are exceptional. So having to put everything, all the logistical plans, all the training of staff, the printing of ballot paper in 42 days presented what, in my view, could be considered as insurmountable. But nonetheless, we are here. We've done everything reasonable to ensure that we have a decent election process tomorrow.
So there was a seemingly long road to get to this place where we are, but you had a short period of time, right? Talk to us about that, what comes with that. You went through a court process as well. Has that hurt the reputation of the Electoral Commission of South Africa, better known as the Independent Electoral Commission? Has that hurt your reputation in any way?
I don't think so. I don't think it did. The commission had to take a very conservative position in the midst of a ravaging pandemic. Remember the context at the time, it was the third wave in July, when close to 18,000 people were infected on average a day. Now, given that context, a question had to be asked. Will a free and fair election be possible in that context? And the commission doesn't sit, the 5 members don't sit on their own and say, yes, it won't be possible. They institute a thoroughgoing process, comprehensive process, an independent process led by a former Deputy Chief Justice. He involves the medical fraternity, he involves political parties, he involves civil society, and he does comparative research and arrives at a decision that says, in his view, an election won't be possible within the constitutionally defined time frame. Perhaps let's try end of February. But the science behind that process, and that science is the number of people who are likely to be vaccinated at the time. Parties were never of one mind. There were diametrically opposed views on the political side. And the court saw it differently. They say, proceed with the election, the freeness and fairness of it will be assessed ex post facto. That should not lead to a credibility crisis. In our view, is a reasonable thing to have done in those circumstances.
You were instructed to go ahead. When we look at the numbers of COVID-19, the latest we have is about 300 new cases, relatively low in the last 24 hours. 12 people have passed away. We can't let that number be abstract, although it is less. God forbid that we have post-election a number of new cases coming up. I understand the position that you're in as the IEC, but would you feel responsible in some way for that?
No, not quite. And the reason we won't feel responsible is because we have put in place COVID measures at the voting station, a COVID protocol, which involves social distancing, the application of sanitizer upon entry at the station, the mandatory wearing of a mask. We've provided appropriate level of PPE for our staff and so on. So when one looks at those cumulative measures, we've taken reasonable steps to ensure that our staff primarily, as well as the voter, or rather voting stations don't serve as points of a wanton contagion for people who are role players.
I fully understand the measures that you have put in place, and I think it's necessary in order to prevent spread. How strict are you going to be, though, when people are violating the social distancing of people, if they do, in terms of carrying their own pens, if they don't have their own pens? Talk to us about the measures you put in place in order to ensure that there's no spread or limited.
Well, there'll be a dedicated staff member who's going to look after the protocol measures at all voting stations. The South African Police Services have been well briefed to ensure that people observe the social distancing on the queues. And the issue of pens, I think we have dealt with it, and we're saying we encourage people to bring their own pens. But that does not mean there won't be pens in the voting stations. There will be. We've provided for those, and so on. So we have to be relatively strict, and I'm also addressing my colleagues who will be taking up their positions tomorrow, that let's be strict with the social distancing. Let's be strict with the wearing of masks, because ultimately it's the right thing to do in the interest of public health.
Yeah. So let's talk about what strict means. If somebody comes to vote, standing in the line, they don't want to follow social distancing protocols, they don't have a mask, will they be removed from that line? Will they be prevented from voting?
Certainly, without a mask, you will not enter the voting station, and the reasons for that must be obvious. If you don't adhere to social distancing, we'll politely ask you to social distance, and hopefully 90% of people will comply with a polite reminder to social distance.
I know I need to let you go, Mr. Mamabolo. I kept you for a long time, but just one quick question. We are expecting the results to be announced by Thursday or so. What will prevent it from being announced on that day? What sort of factors are you contemplating if that doesn't happen on Thursday?
Well, there are many factors that could influence the date on which the Commission may announce the results. The voting stations will close at 9 and will count immediately. We'll start capturing. We believe that the first 90% of results will be in within the first 24 hours. Right. And the last 10% is one that is challenging. It will take another 24 hours to deal with the balance of the 10%. We don't anticipate that we could not be in a position not to announce by Thursday.
So we thank you very much indeed for coming on and giving us the answers as best you can. No doubt we will be touching base with you to get further developments. But for now, thank you very much indeed for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, that was the Chief Electoral Officer of the Electoral Commission of South Africa, Mr. Mamabolo. Before we wrap up,